A warm welcome from a very warm South Africa to all our viewers, and welcome to Live at the Watering Hole. And we're starting out this afternoon at Eldonyo in Kenya, where we've got what seemed to be a little bit of a standoff between an impala and an elephant bull. Now, my name is Jaapie Potgieter, and I'll be your host this afternoon. And by the looks of that beautiful cloudy sky there, it looks quite warm. I think we're going to have a very busy afternoon around the water. And I'm certainly excited to see what will happen this afternoon. You can see this impala is slightly nervous. A bit of a step to drink there. The rocky, rough ground does make it a little bit unstable for quick movements, but then of course, being on his own, he's certainly a little bit intimidated by that big elephant. Not sure what he wants. So you can see he's watching the elephant's every move. That move of the elephant towards that water inlet, along with the birds flying on and off the impala, I think is giving him quite a bit of a nervous reaction to the presence of the elephant. Now, being an impala, having quite or relatively high water requirements for an antelope, this guy wouldn't have come from too far away, unlike these oryxes. And have a look at their careful approach. And there's an elephant in the background shaking the entire tree as he's scratching himself. Good shoulder and behind the ear scratch there. But yeah, I would like to remind our viewers that this afternoon is live and interactive. So you can either from your app log on and join us. You can send your questions to wildearth.tv/questions, or you can scan our QR code. Of course, you can also join us from YouTube at FC, where you can send your comments and questions. And of course, you can let us know what you want to talk about, or if there's anything in particular that you'd like to see. And then of course you can also head over to X or Twitter and use the hashtag to join in on the conversation. You can hear zebras calling in the background. Sounds a little nervous. You can see this oryx is lit up. It's almost like a beam of sun that's come through the cloud barrier in the sky, and I'm pretty sure that that sun's extremely hot. Oryx had a very careful approach. But it looks like it gave the impala a second round of courage. Now, this is quite interesting. You can see they're watching each other's movements very, very carefully. And this is how they adapt to a situation like this. They know that around a watering hole can be an area where there might be predators. And it is a moment of vulnerability for a lot of the plant-eating animals coming down to drink. So what they do is they just watch the others around the water. That, coupled with the alarms of the birds, you can see those tails going vigorously. I'm assuming in this heat around the water there must be a lot of things biting these animals. Darcy Miller, a good afternoon to you too. And also to you, Mercedes Bean. And happy Tuesday. And happy Tuesday indeed. And look at that. That oryx is going down on the front legs. Get better access to the water. And also to compensate for that little dip there where you can see it looks like he's standing in a little dip. It looks like there's some mud that's been taken out there. And I have seen when the water flows over them, elephants and warthogs often go into that corner of the pan. Radebe, you asking which antelope is most found, or is the most of found in Africa? That's a good question. I think there's a number of contenders. I'm actually not 100% sure currently. I know that up until recently, the largest land mammal migration was considered to be the East African migration of the wildebeest, along with zebra and other antelopes. And then recently they've managed to get some video footage of the massive South Nile migration. And over there, the antelope that predominantly makes up that migration is the black-eared cob. In vast numbers. If I'm not mistaken, I can't even remember what the exact numbers are, but the East African migration, I think, is just over 2 million animals, where where the new migration in southern Sudan, I think they've estimated it at about 4 to 6 million animals, which is ridiculous. And then, of course, back in the day, there are reports and records of springboks migrating from the Kalahari down to the southwestern coast in South Africa. And that was estimated to be over millions of animals. Now, they are mostly eyewitness accounts from interviews held with people way back when. And some of those estimations, as I've read, has been in and around the region of about 15 million. And imagine that. Apparently they caused huge devastation as they moved through the landscape. And it didn't happen annually, it happened every now and again. Well, looks like these antelopes have moved off, so we're going to go see what's happening at Tau this afternoon. Whoa, that's quite a few elephants. Quite a few. And what is that? Is that a cat drinking? Yes, indeed, there is a cat drinking. Have a look at that waterbuck approaching. That's quite unexpected. Looks like a cheetah. Phew, what a spectacular scene. A cheetah amongst all of these elephants. Yo, I was so struck by all the large elephants that I didn't even notice the cheetah drinking off on the side. Well, at least we know that its camouflage is working very well. You can see it looks like something dangling around its neck, which I'm presuming is a tracking collar. I know in areas like Tau and other regions, with cheetah being such an endangered animal and such an important animal, and these reserves that have healthy populations of cheetah play vital roles within the management of what they refer to as the meta population, which is the a larger group of genetics that can be used to trade animals and spread genes over different regions. Now, it's not completely unusual to see a cheetah out during the middle of the day, but in and amongst this amount of elephants, I did not expect that. I guess it's nice and open, so and he's got space. That is spectacular. That's a first for me. Not just a Tau, but also live at the waterhole. So, KT101, you were asking how much an elephant can drink during one day. That's a good question. And we can see that elephant behind the cheetah covering himself with mud. They have very, very large or very high water requirements. And I think sometimes what people mistake is the actual water requirement and the amount that they require to drink. Now, on average, a large elephant can drink more than 200 liters of water a day. Generally, the amounts are put between 150 to 300 liters, depending on the animal's size as well as the conditions. Fuzzy Dunlop, that was indeed a thirsty kitty. Looks like he's slowed down now, or she. Not sure about the sex or the age. Yo, that is spectacular. What a sight. You can see the elephants aren't even really paying attention, but I'm sure the antelopes and some of the other animals will be. You can see the cheetah's walking with its head down low. The ears are flattened. It's already quite exposed out in this open section. There we go. What's that? A waterbuck looking at it. The cheetah obviously not, or trying to minimize looking at it directly. And this is quite interesting behavior. Have a look at how these large male waterbuck, they're keeping a distance, they're moving parallel. ensuring they keep an eye on the potential threat here. Even though the cheetah looks like it was moving quite lazily, being out in the open like that, they don't really like that. There's an animal that's markings on its body. Its camouflage plays a vital role in its hunting technique, and therefore the way it acquires food. So it's already exposed, and it knows it, but it still tries to do everything it can to minimize attention. And then, of course, it's hot. You can see it's just looking away from the waterbuck. It knows that the waterbuck is looking at it, and cheetahs generally don't like the direct attention, so they'll break eye contact, even with us sometimes, and that's usually a sign of nervousness. Now, of course, if one of them gets too close, the cheetah might react and try to make sure that they keep their distance. I wonder if it's going to go for one more drink. He's trying to step over the deeper, muddier tracks there. Typical cat. His thin, long legs reaching out. Looking a little bit uncomfortable, not the usual habitat. And I might be going towards shade, and that's why it's checking so carefully also, because it knows, like itself, there's also other cats, other predators that might like the shade this time of the day. Let's have a look. Yeah, it looks like it's going to go lay down. All right, well, that was spectacular. How lucky are we this afternoon? What a great, great sighting here early on this afternoon. I'm pretty sure that cheetah will probably settle there for a little while. Being well camouflaged in the shade, I think it's unfair that we pay attention to some of the other creatures in the area. If you can see that waterbuck standing there, they're going to be watching it for a while. Oh, wow, this looks like an incredibly busy afternoon here. Sadist being, that was certainly incredible. I think just that sight of all these elephants and the cheetah in the front. Kim Faustino is saying it's 6:45 p.m. Shoo. I'm assuming that means the sun is already almost setting, if it hasn't yet. So a good evening to you. And old punkster, that was indeed crazy. That was phenomenal. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think the surprise of it more so than anything. Now you can see And that elephant relieving himself there. There's quite a foam build-up there where his urine is hitting the ground. And it's quite a large amount of moisture that gets expelled. Also in the dung it's dropping, it's very wet. And it's also moisture lost. So they do have very high water requirements. And that's why staying within proximity to a large watering hole like this is quite important. I mean, they can go far distances and they can find water in the most arid of regions. But when it's there, they'll happily spend enough time around it. You can see this one in front on the water's edge stirring up some mud, ready to mud bath. This has been a very, very productive watering hole. And talking about productive watering holes, let's go have a look and see if there's more elephants at Tembe this afternoon. It's indeed an elephant afternoon. Very, very busy here at Tembe. I can tell it's been busy over the last few days. I can tell it from various reasons just by looking at the landscape. You can see these little dust bowls in and around the water's been dug a lot deeper since the last time I saw it. So it's definitely been heating up here in Maputo land. Lots of elephant bulls. I can see one or two that I recognize from the markings in their ears. Saw one with a drooping ear earlier. Now, South Africa's had quite a bit of cold weather lately. Slightly unusual for such a late period within the dry season, but it certainly looks like the summer heat has moved in. And that's why we can see all these elephants dusting themselves or mudding themselves as they were at tile. And it's busy. I can hear the geese, I can hear the birds going. The weavers are starting. Egyptian geese going there in the background. Some big bulls around the water here. Always a good spot for some interaction. And here we can see the larger of the two being a little bit imposing. In a gentle manner though. The longer I look at this watering hole, the more I see what seems to be some yellow-billed storks in the background. There's an impala. Of course, the big elephants. Shame the smaller elephant out of these two doesn't really have a say in the matter, but you do find sometimes that if there's an area of general interest and an elephant's busy there, then the larger elephant might come over and kind of hone in on that animal. And then unless that animal's willing to tolerate it, we'll probably have to move off. Now there's the elephant with the droopy ear I was talking about earlier, and I've seen this elephant around. But judging from the calm nature and the fact that that elephant's using the larger one to scratch himself, I'm assuming that they are well acquainted with each other. You can see as they're digging, the soil deeper down is a little bit darker than the topsoil. Also, soils here, they sometimes keep the moisture quite well, meaning that that lower soil would be a lot cooler. And in that regard, it must be quite comfortable for these elephants to cover themselves with these clumps of soil, kind of like us at the beach on a hot day where we try to dig our feet and arms deep in under the sand to get to the cooler sand that was less exposed to the sun. But just look at that. We can't see, it looks like it's overcast, so we can't see the shady spots under the trees, but the elephants are quite aware that they do block the sun's rays. I'm assuming now, after the little bit of moisture that this area has seen, there's a lot of elephants that's probably moved out of the region temporarily and started to move back now to come and see whatever new food is available. But what's interesting about this group, and I'm taking a guess here, I can't see each and every one of them clearly, but it looks like these are mostly males. You can see the older ones down here on the bottom right, the elephant with the very big tusks. And then the younger ones there at the back. And the older ones always minding more of their own business, where the younger ones tend to push and play a little bit. And with Tembe especially, I find it fascinating that there's quite a number of rather young males that join these groups of bull elephants. So they kind of learn the ways, the paths early on in life. And I'm comparing that to the Lowveld region in the Kruger Park of South Africa, where I've noticed in the past it tends to be the younger bull elephants tend to stay with the herds for slightly longer periods. I mean, it's not uncommon to find a young elephant with older ones, but the average age tends to be slightly higher for the bulls moving in small groups. It's been a brilliant elephant afternoon this far, but we're going to head over to Juma and see if what Africam's got us there this afternoon. A very muddy elephant. I can almost feel the relief for this animal with that. It seems to be quite a strong breeze going. You can see a couple of impala. Very reluctantly but hopeful, looking for a little bit of green grass growing in those open patches along the water's edge. What a casual stroll. One foot in front of the other, it's moving rather, looks like it's moving rather slowly. But it's incredible how much distance that animal can cover in one of those strides. And it was obviously moving with determination to get there. Looks like that tree was almost pushed over for that very reason, or it's at a perfect height for this elephant. It's got that bend situated at a level where it will fit perfectly behind the ear. Now it's interesting here at Juma, we can see it's still very dry and the rains haven't come, but there's a lot of green. And I can see a clear pathway that elephant's walking on there. And the The larger trees along the edge of this indicates that he's moving up a dry riverbed, so there might be water deeper down, but as he's moving off, we're going to head over to a very dry area, to Okukuyo. Phew. I think I'm going to start counting all the elephants that I've seen this afternoon. I'm going to have a quick look. Phew, this is very busy. Over here, of course, this region, the water sources are few and far in between, so these elephants would have all spent time feeding in the nearby area, and this region where Ikukuyu is situated is known to be the winter feeding grounds. But it looks like they all decided to come down at the same time today. Oh, there's a lot of elephant here. And those two waterfowl in the middle. They don't know where to go. It's almost like they're playing ping pong with the open edges. Now I'm going to attempt a quick count here. Sure, there's close to 50 elephants from what I can count. Pizza Man, you said you counted 40. Look, I might have maybe counted one or two more than once. It's difficult in the clumps to say for sure. And Joan Mello, you're saying Africa sure doesn't have a shortage of ellies. It's an interesting statement. And I'll get into that a little bit more now. It's actually quite interesting and well worth talking about. But certain areas certainly don't have a shortage. And I heard what sounded like an elephant calf calling earlier. And it was probably a female refusing the young calf to drink. That's interesting. The weaning process within elephants can start as early as 3 months, but it can last all the way through to about 3 years. So then I'm hearing a count of 44. I think 44 is quite, so around 40, 44, I'd say less than 50 maybe, but more than 40. What an incredible sight. And that is something that that has happened with the elephant population. So elephants long ago being prosecuted and almost hunted to extinction. Their numbers dropped severely, and then with the introduction of protective spaces, obviously their numbers picked up quite a bit. They don't have much natural predators, especially not after a certain age. But one thing that's for sure is that they're quite intelligent, and due to that, they tend to congregate in these protected areas, which in some instances can put a lot of pressure on the resources within that region, and of course provide a little bit of a headache to the parties involved in having to manage them. I mean, a lot of elephants can be quite a destructive force if they want to be, and that can have knock-on effects to other creatures in certain regions. I know one of the interesting things is I remember reading about years ago, due to civil wars, elephants were found there were a lot of elephants a little bit further up from the central parts of Botswana and away from the drier parts of northern Namibia. And as the wars kept going, some of those elephants were forced out of their former habitats and they moved into some of the drier regions. And what happened is they actually impacted the vegetation in those areas severely. And, that's definitely an example of how an imbalance in one area can affect another area, especially with a creature so large as the elephant. I mean, they're much larger than us. They roam over large areas. They're vitally essential to any ecosystem that they thrive in or that they're found in. But they also affect that ecosystem. And formerly, before the advent of national parks and protected areas, that's been separated from areas where there's human habitations, they were free to roam anywhere. So that vast distance and the constant search for resources kind of acted in a way that they managed their own numbers in certain regions, but also there were other regions with more than enough food. This is quite a sight indeed. And quite a few springbok coming down now. You can see that one young elephant kind of in the middle right of the watering hole is now surrounded by springbok. For a moment there, looked a little bit unsure. And one enthusiastic member of the herd going for a full dive there in the central part. You can see some of the smaller ones. It's amazing. They just got out of the water and the heat's already affecting them. They're moving into the shade of that big tree. But I guess they're also trying to retain that moisture for as long as possible. Now, I have spoken about it before, but one theory suggests that part of the reasons for elephants having such wrinkly skin is for them to increase the surface area, which helps with the regulation of their body temperature, helps them to hold on to moisture for longer. With the wetness and the mud staying cool and wet in between the folds for longer. And in that regard, a little elephant It's not quite as wrinkly as the older ones. Baby elephants go through what is known as molts, skin molts, which is just where their skin gets, the outer texture of the skin gets tougher and changes as they grew older at certain ages. And they'll go through a number of those, especially at the start, especially with their rapid growth. But old Punkster, you saying that there may be over 50 elephants. I think you're right. I think I might go with my first count, which would be roughly around 50, maybe one or two more. And Joan Mello, you asking if too many of one species can be a bad thing. In some regards, it can. It depends on the species, of course, and it also depends on a lot of other factors. But generally speaking, too many of one species can have severe impacts on other species. It means that there's a lot of competition. If there's too many of one species, it means that conditions are quite favorable for that single species, and that means that it is not as favorable for other species. But too many elephants in one area could potentially damage the vegetation, which could affect the occurrence of other species in that area, or if they've got nowhere to go, it might affect their numbers. Generally, with very large population rises, what we find is also the outbreak of disease, and that's kind of a natural way that nature maintains the balance. But indeed, too much of one species is usually not a great thing. But then you also have certain periods where after certain periods of one species or an abundance of a food source has a rise in a certain species, and you have another species that picks up and its numbers rise to kind of counteract and try and rebalance that. And then, of course, a huge threat to biodiversity nowadays is introduced species into areas that they don't naturally occur in, and that brings about the invasive qualities, and then they just flourish and they take over completely. And then they can provide some serious problems to the management of certain natural systems. It looks like there's a few younger elephants in the water. If I had to take a guess, I'd say it's probably some of the older boys. The females gave the very young ones chance to go in and cool themselves off. Now that they've had their share, the rowdy boys are playing for a little longer. That was spectacular to see. But we're going to head back to Oldonyo and see who's come in to drink there. We have a couple of superb starlings, as well as some giraffe. It was quite funny. That giraffe stepped right up to the other one. It looked like a choreographed move. Talk about being in one space. No, maybe it's also just the angle that I'm sitting at. You can see the one standing off to the right. The distance those two, their mouths are moving, so they're just chewing the cud, using this opportunity to continue the digestion process. And that way they're covering all their bases. Each of these giraffes checking into a different direction. It looks like a couple of females actually in and amongst this group, which is nice to see. Maybe that's why they're waiting for the others to catch up. Kim Faustino, you're saying that they look like they're in a meeting. In fact, they actually are. They're in a very important meeting. It's a meeting about the direction into which they're going to go. So sometimes what we find is, even though they don't look like they're paying attention to each other directly, they do communicate. The animals in groups especially, they form very subtle cues. And they have very subtle cues that others might follow. And you often find that one animal starts heading into a direction and the others will follow. The male giraffe, standing behind the two at the water's edge, looks like a decent-sized large male. Now, I'm assuming he's here for other reasons. He was probably not traveling with this group all the time and kind of wandered over when he saw them from a distance. There's definitely something drawing their attention, but they're not bothered to the point that they won't drink. I think the presence of all the other animals in the area is a sign to them that it's safe to drink. Now we have some zebra coming in. I always like watching zebras around the watering holes. It can be quite a toss up and a change up. I find it interesting that occasionally the zebra tends to get a little bit agitated when they get thirsty and having to approach the water with all the other animals around, the birds, the biting insects, especially for a pregnant zebra. like this one possibly is. It looks like it might be. Probably just wants to get drinking and head back to a shady spot. And I really enjoy listening to the sounds here at Old Donyo. It's quite clear. You can hear the animals slurping, even the giraffe, and then the hooves moving over the rocks packed on the side of this pan. It's quite a vigorous flip of the head, that. And then got spooked by what I'm assuming was that oxpecker. Being such a large animal, it spooked everything else around as well, even if it was just for a brief moment. And it looks like it's almost like it's not done drinking yet. It's contemplating going back, even though the rest have moved off by now. There we go, there's the rest of them. You can see them feeding, some of them feeding with their necks down. Saw the two walking off to the right. It looks like there was a male following a female there, so I'm assuming he might be interested. And I actually recently saw something on giraffes using, the male giraffes using their head to kind of bump the female giraffes in the bladder. That enables them to release a little bit of urine so that they can investigate that and pick up from the chemical cues whether they might be ready to mate or not, or approaching readiness to mate. Sometimes you'll find that they might just hang around and follow them. Jeremiah Malotti, you asked me if this is the only watering hole in the reserve. I am assuming not. I don't know. But I am assuming not. I do know, however, that this is a man-made one, of course, and provides vitally important water for some of these animals. They know it's a permanent source, so that's why there's such a lot of animals in and around this area. And it's also to keep animals in this region and provide paying guests who go on safari here to get the chance to see these animals. Because this is a very, very dry, semi-arid region, this. And, there is some good food for giraffe here. If there's no water in this region, it might make a lot of the other animals move away, at least certain periods of the year. It could have very up and down game viewing, and therefore might even impact the funds generated through the tourism run in this area. Oh, we have an eland. No, talking about arid regions. And antelope is well adapted for the drier regions. Giraffe actually just checking it out. You could almost see it looking down in the eland. But looks like the giraffes have had their time to drink, so now it's the eland. And the look of these, I can see it's a very long, you know, more narrow stroke horns. One thing that always strikes me from the regions in East Africa is the very impressive horns that some of the species have, at least in comparison to some regions in South Africa. But of course, being female, not necessarily they're used them for protection, being a large antelope, not extremely, well, they're fast, but I mean, not extremely fast in comparison to some of the other sought after species that lion might hunt, so those horns definitely play a role in their protection, but they don't use it to compete. So you'll find sometimes the old, more dominant bulls, they have these short, thick horns that they get from wearing them down as they compete. Not just through fighting, but they also rub them on all kinds of stuff. Sometimes they'll adorn them with mud. And quite a short drink, at least compared to the giraffe. By the looks of it, I saw that one's belly is bulging. I would say that female is possibly pregnant, that eland. An interesting way they have of walking. They walk so much different, or they look like they walk so different from other antelope. Even though it's such a large antelope, their legs look like it's rather short. You can see that giraffe's just packing it in there. Looks like almost like new green leaves on that tree. And with the added advantage of having the height, that giraffe's quite capable of getting right on top of the tree, and you can see it's just sitting, not even chewing. It's just the lips and the tongue moving. The padded lips and a very rough and tough tongue. Of course, the tongue is also covered with a thick layer of saliva. These giraffes must have very, very active saliva glands. I guess like a lot of the other antelopes and creatures eating leaves as well. But with giraffe specifically, also aiding in the protection from cuts and scratches from the thorn trees that they feed off. And this one, judging from its ossicones, I can see it's got tufts at the top, so it looks like a female. Interesting, it's quite a dark female in the color. I've often heard people saying that male giraffes tend to be darker due to the testosterone levels. And there's certainly some truth in that. I think there's definitely an age within male giraffes' lives where when the testosterone flowing strongly, you can see they're well built. They do look a little darker. And some of the older males, I've noticed sometimes some of the older males tend to be pale on occasions. And funnily enough, the serious giraffe fights that I've had the chance to witness in the past, I think the paler, old, skinnier male, as you can see, is a little bit more battle worn, and that has the added experience that actually wins the fight compared to the younger, stronger, I guess more logical option, or at least what we would think would be the more logical victor. And then, of course, it's got a lot to do with genetics as well. And I know there's a long-term study done. I can't remember exactly whether it was in Serengeti or the Mara. I believe it might have been in the Mara, where over many, many years they were able to use the open country to get very, very good and well-documented evidence of certain individuals, their movements, who they mated with, when they mated with them, and of course, with very concrete and well-documented photographic evidence, they managed to compile profiles of all of the animals. They compared, and with the added advantage of using artificial intelligence within photo recognition systems, they were able to determine if there is a similarity between the offspring and their mothers. in terms of their markings, the unique markings on the body. So the ultimate conclusion was that these giraffes or young giraffes would tend to inherit their coat patterns more so from their mothers than their fathers. It's interesting to know for how many other species that might be true. I'm sure it could be. Look with the zebra. Interesting. There's always a little break for the animals before they get to the water, just to check, make sure. You can see nervous reaction from the one triggered it through the others. And safety in numbers. Group animals gather together, they form their groups, but not necessarily of a concern or the population that entails a concern for the other's well-being, more so for their own well-being. Because it pays, and it's good to know that when you're in a group, there's a good chance that one of the other guys can get eaten and not you. And there has been a lot of zebra coming down to have a drink this afternoon. It's good to see. They often are species that come down during the hotter times of the day. And another eland. It's also been nice to see. There's been a couple of eland that's come down this afternoon as well. And we're far off in the distance, I can hear from guinea fowl. Sarah, you're asking if it's true that the stripes of the zebra can confuse predators. Very good question. I think one of the words that I quite like, and that also leans to their collective noun, is a dazzle. The dazzling the predators, when they stand together like that, they do create the dazzling effect in predators' eyes. And predators generally regarded as seeing in black and white more so, especially nighttime predators that have different type of photoreceptors in their eyes that's adapted to seeing movement and shape better than color, and that enables them with much better eyesight, more effective in low light conditions. So in that regard, standing together like that, they could definitely present a more difficult target in terms of making it easy for the predator to single out an animal. But then again, predators are also adapted to that in a little bit. They look for other things, always certain aspects that might make an animal more vulnerable. You don't necessarily go for the largest and the strongest, but rather for the weakest and the injured and the sick and the attack that way, and eliminating the sick animals and the weaker genes. But the theory as to why they have this structure has been a bit of a debate over the years, and every now and again new evidence has surfaced with a new supported theory. And currently, the most widely supported theory is that it's a deterring mechanism for biting flies. And we did quite an interesting study on this. It covered and painted a whole bunch of horses with zebra stripes, and through motion or pressure sensors, they kind of got a general idea of how many flies, the biting flies, actually visit the animal in a certain given time. And I don't know the exact details of the study, but it got down to the fact that the stripes made the biting fly slightly less. And then, of course, there's also the theory that it aids in thermoregulation, but I guess it could be a number of these factors. In nature, we often find that animals do, or certain adaptations do serve more than one particular function. But that was very productive. I think we're going to head back to Juma to see if there's anything else that come down to drink there. What a sight. And this is the elephant Machangani, as I learned yesterday. And what an impressive bull elephant. Look at the size of those tusks. But he's got quite an imposing presence. It's like almost like, hello, I'm here, look at me. And as we got to this Africam, he was standing dead still, not moving, and with the height difference between him and the one behind him, it did look like quite an interesting situation. Really good to get to see another view of this elephant. I think while these two spend their moment around the water here, we're going to head back to Tau. Where we have more elephants coming down. By the looks of it, these elephants have not been to the water. You can see a cautious matriarch leading the way, with the others neatly lined up behind her. A careful approach, and also coming in on the further end, the watering hole. Elephants often enter the general area with water quite cautiously and at first slowly, and then once they get to the water and the matriarch's kind of given the go ahead or the all clear sign, then you'll see the little ones usually pick up pace, almost in a manner that they can't contain their excitement. So let's see if it happens here. There's a tiny little one in the middle there, and that is, I'm sure, part of the reason why they're so careful. Now it looks like the young bull's breaking away a little bit. And in the background there, it looks like there's a very big bull elephant moving about. Not sure if he's coming this way or going. Now they're heading towards the direction that the cheetah was or went to go lay down earlier. Now I would love to see if they might be able to pick up a bit of the lingering scent. That little one seems to just want to get in on the muddy action. Now, of course, a cheetah wouldn't necessarily pose a threat, maybe to a very, very young elephant, but even that, with the presence of the older ones, not really. But because it is a predator, they do react. It looks like they've got a good muddy spot there. And have a look. I think the little one might go down. Just had to go get into that deeper, loose wallow of mud right underneath his mother's nose. They must have come from quite a distance out. You can see their first priority is to cover themselves with mud. So I'm assuming that the sun's done its bit on their skin, even though it's tough. They don't. It's still very sensitive, so they don't play around with the hot sun. It's interesting how, after watching elephants for a while, we can just tell a lot of things from just watching their behavior. You can tell which ones are male, which ones are female. Males are usually slightly more exploratory, slightly more adventurous. It's also the first to turn tail and run should they get spooked. That looks very satisfying. Yo, and that big elephant's loosening up that mud properly there, making sure that there's enough. So it looks very, very satisfying, and I'm pretty sure that little one's going to do the same. You can see it's always struggling a little bit in the mud, but of course, having the big ones around, they'll very carefully make sure that it can get to wallow, but also be protected. It's interesting how, as the season moves on, and these wallows or little mud pools kind of shift around, how different areas within a watering hole gets to get used over change in time. I find it quite interesting. It's usually quite a nice dynamic to watch. Now, I'm assuming that the cheetah we saw earlier has moved off. Those elephants are right there where it went to go lay down in the shade. And there certainly would have been quite the reaction if it was still around. So I don't think there's any cheetah around here currently. Nonetheless, it's a good shady spot with a little bit of green, so good spot to stop. Yeah, it looks like there's a cattle egret, western cattle egret there in the water, trying to come and capitalize off all the disturbed insects and creatures moving in and amongst that wet, muddy section. There's quite a few birds around this area. It's interesting, after animals move away, you can see the birds move in, kind of migrate in the direction where the elephants have been or where they are, as we're seeing currently. And I think it's going to get right in there. And of course, the elephant didn't like the close encounter. Maybe he was a bit surprised. He was so busy digging in the mud there, he didn't even notice the bird sneaking up on him. Quite a few elephants coming down now. Yo, just look at that. Elephants everywhere you look. I can see at least one, two, three, four, five standing there in the distance. And with their drab grey colors, they're blending in perfectly. Almost the same color as the hills. You can see that head bobbing movement. This elephant's clearly more eager to get to the water. It looks like he's had some mud, so maybe he's just heading over to the herd to go and investigate. Mr. Jason Voorhees, you are asking where the crocs are at. Sorry, Mrs. Jason Voorhees. Now, I have not seen the crocodile yet, at least not today. I do enjoy seeing the crocodiles. And I think I might have been mistaken with that elephant coming in. I think it was just coming towards the mud here. Nice deep muddy pool. Mrs. Voorhees, you're saying all four crocs are camera shy today. I think so. I didn't even know that there's four. I think I've only seen three at once, but that is good to know. And I'm sure they are camera shy. It looks like it's very hot there, so they might just be hiding in the mud. You can see these elephants, they've already had mud, but they want more. Catherine, this is a very beautiful view of elephants indeed. I like the little ones, especially when they're in a comfortable space like this, where they have water. Look at that little one. The only worry he's currently got is making sure to cover all the little cracks and nooks with mud. Just look at them go. Looks like a lot of fun. See the older ones turn to feeding now. Looks like they've literally got everything here. Rosie Adams, you said crocs, but the cheetah. Yes, we were very, very fortunate with that this afternoon. I think it is safe to say that for one afternoon, not having to see the crocs, but the cheetah instead is very, very exciting and something a little bit different. Oh, and there's a baboon. Two baboons. But I have to say, that cheetah, if the crocs were nearby, that cheetah would have certainly been on its lookout for those crocs. Nice to see a troop of baboons. Actually, I haven't seen a troop of baboons here for a little while. Always funny to watch. Just like baby elephants. It's almost coming as a natural assumption that they're getting into trouble. But they're actually just going about with their daily lives. Now just have a look at that. You can see how plastered that back wall of the watering hole is with mud from elephants coming and going. And it's amazing. This elephant to the left is standing quite deep in the mud. It goes to show that big elephant cow that went in there earlier loosened it up nicely. And that elephant on the right is busy scratching with his trunk up in his ear. Now that, usually I like to watch that after they've covered themselves with all that mud. It's like a moment of relief, and then it's like a little moment of doing some maintenance, just grabbing the excess mud out of the ear holes, sometimes rubbing the eyes. Spreading a bit of mud over the delicate areas. And the one's got his head down and deep into that mud. I wonder what he's trying to do. He might be loosening up more mud with the tusks. Maybe he's trying to cover that area, the bottom jaw, the neck. But they're taking a lot of effort to make sure that they cover almost every aspect of them. Now, I know this particular region gets extremely hot, but I think it's also got to do with the fact that maybe they might know that they're going to be traveling quite a bit after this, and who knows when they'll be back near the water or near the mud. And sometimes what elephants will do is, like we saw with the herd that came down, is they come They prioritize covering themselves with mud. If there's not deep enough water, and then they'll have a drink, and then they might go back to covering themselves with a bit of mud. And finally, they seal it in just before they move off. Cat fan, you're saying the little Ellies are so cute and that it's lovely to see their joy. I agree. I think it's always the relief from the heat with the mud and the water always gives them that little bit of an energy burst, and it usually provides for a lot of good fun. That's quite something to watch. Elephant feet always look so awkward when they're stepping out of the mud onto a steep bank, but still quite capable, not slipping at all. We have a few more elephants. The rest of them mostly look like bull elephants. Turns out 689. You're asking why the elephants put the mud on them? They do so to help them not only cool down but also to protect their skin. The mud provides a extra layer over the skin. It protects it from the direct sunlight, and then of course it serves other functions as well. It keeps them cool. The mud moves into the cracks and the folds where it stays, and that helps keeping them cool. When the wind blows over that, that lowers the temperature of the body, or it provides relief at the very least. And then of course it also helps with exfoliation and treating ecto or skin parasites. When that mud dries out and they move over to a hard surface like a rock or the side of a tree, they can rub themselves up against it and they can remove not only the excess mud, which would at that point make their skin probably feel quite stiff, but also takes with it whatever ectoparasites like ticks might have been stuck inside. And you can see with these elephants, for instance, when they have that smooth backsides, the elephant there on the far left has got mud on his body, and he's covered with a bit of mud more recently, where this one here on the right looks like he's been rubbing himself. You can usually see the lighter patches, and that's where the mud thins out and looks like the elephant's been rolling around. You can see this elephant's having his tail hanging straight down. He's got front left foot up in the air, kind of. Not flapping his ears. Trunk is on the ground, so he's just checking out what those elephants are doing and where they're going. And this is quite interesting because it's not something that we always pick up on, the communication of these animals over a distance. And large elephant bulls tend to scope each other out from a distance. Even if they are acquainted with each other, there is often a chance of animosity, or at least of a less favorable encounter. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen here and if they might meet up. But we're going to leave these elephants and we're going to head back to Okukuyu. Where we still have more elephants. That seems to be huddled up zebra. Oh, look at the baby elephant off to the right. Rosie Adams, you're saying that you love the antics of the Ellie tots. The Ellie tot. That little one was an Ellie tot. You can see now, it looks like his mom's come over. I think he was a little bit hesitant due to the other young ones in the water. But of course, there's nothing that gives one as much courage as having your 3-ton mother walking right beside you. Oh, what a sight. I'm assuming that these are still the same Ellies from earlier. Some of them seem to move into the shade, neatly packed. And that way they would come and go into the water, utilizes it for as long as possible. It might be an extended resting period before a big move tonight. And like at any party, there's always those that's more relaxed, and then there's those that's a little bit more hyperactive, like the little ones in the middle. And the zebra and the springbok just need to wait their turn. Hilary D from the UK. You asking if elephants have a problem with dried mud stuck inside their trunks when they spray themselves? So that's a very good question because I'm sure there's some mud that gets in there, but even though we don't necessarily see it, the elephant actually kind of picks that mud up and uses the front part of the trunk kind of like a little hand. And it takes this clumps of mud and then kind of just swings and throws that mud all over the body. It is not, it doesn't really go up the trunk, so they don't slurp or suck up the mud within the trunk like they do when they're drinking water. And they'll close off their nostrils. So it's only kind of picking that mud up and throwing it to the targeted areas that they're aiming at. But I guess when it's very, very dry, if there is mud around the edges of the front part of the trunk, there's a real possibility that they'll get a lot of dust coming up in the trunks. But they've also got mucus glands, and that helps to keep their trunk clean. Yo, what a spectacular sight. It's such a different view from what I'm used to seeing elephants at. And I can't help but think that little one there on the right hand side, I can see he's taking this chance also to not only rest but also drink from his mother. And the distances that that little one will still have to cover, the hardships that it will have to deal with. And the wealth of knowledge that his mom will pass on to him. Some of these elephants that's adapted for these drier conditions, they have such an incredible wealth of knowledge. Well, a lot of elephants have that. Big elephant bulls and matriarchs, but just to know exactly where to move to when it's very dry, where to go find water. Imagine the map of this area in that elephant's head. Knowing exactly where to go. I can hear a bit of rumbling there. It might be time for these guys to start heading into a direction. Or at the very least start to call the overly excited young ones in the water out. There we can hear another one calling, possibly another frustrated little young one. What an incredible sound. Not something you would necessarily associate with elephants, but it is the frustration of a young one, maybe getting barred from either drinking or doing what it would like to. Look, that one's so excited to get near the other elephants. Literally ran away from his mom. Violet, it's my absolute pleasure for hosting you this afternoon. It's been spectacular. It's been very, very exciting. I would love to know the amount of elephants, the total amount of elephants that we were able to see around the water this afternoon. We had a cheetah, which was a first. So indeed, this is definitely one of those afternoons I won't forget. But yeah, I think that rumble I heard earlier was maybe an early call trying to rally the troops to try and tell them that it's time to start getting ready and time to start moving. So, and that is how it is with the elephants. They, like a lot of other animals, have some sort of a schedule, usually determined by time of the day and the distances that they need to cover, which they are very well aware of. And it just goes to show the intelligence of these animals, especially a big female that knows exactly how long it would take to get to where they need to. And that's considering the whole society or whole group. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And from all of us, including myself, here at Live at the Watering Hole, we would like to wish you a very, very beautiful afternoon wherever you are, and we hope that you join us again tomorrow afternoon to see what other exciting adventures we might have around the watering holes.